Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 8th episode of 30 Minutes Robotic Milking Edition. I'm your host, Marcia Andrews, Dairy Science Professor and Extension Specialist at the University of Minnesota in St. Paul. With us today, we also have your co-host, Jim Sulphur, Dairy Extension Educator at the St. Cloud Regional Extension Office. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Marcia. Welcome, everyone.
Yes, welcome everyone. So we're going to start with a brief introduction and then we'll invite our dairy producer guests to join us. So as a reminder, these episodes are held on the third Thursday of every month at 11:30 a.m. Central US time. If you're watching this as a recorded webinar and next time you want to join us live for the discussion, please register at z.umn.edu/30 MINRM, and you receive your unique Zoom link to join the discussion. Also, all these episodes are being recorded and will be available on the YouTube channel, and you'll receive a link to that channel once the webinar is completed after you attend it. In order to interact today, we're going to use the Q&A box in Zoom, not the chat box, please. You can find the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen if you hover with your mouse, and then you can enter your question or comment, and either Jim or I will read the question or comment on your behalf for our producer to respond to. In addition, if you need live captions, please, again, find those in the bottom of your screen. If you hover over, and I think there's an additional like 3 dots you can click on, and then you can turn those on if you need. So without any further ado, I'd like to invite our dairy producers today. Unique today, we have a different type of robotic system. Until then, we've had hosted producers with what we call the robot box systems, where cows come to a box to be milked individually. But today we have something different. We have a robotic rotary system. So we're very pleased to invite to join us Jon Qual from Qual Dairy, and he's going to be talking about their system, their operation, and reasons they decided to go in that direction with a robotic rotary system. So I'll be changing the pictures for you, Jon. Thank you for providing the virtual pictures, if you will, so people can have an idea what your farm looks like. And we'll spend about 10 minutes or so as you can talk about the operation and some key points about it, and we'll open up for questions after that, okay? So thank you for joining us today. I much appreciate that, and looking forward to this discussion.
Sounds great. Thanks, Marcia. As Marcia had mentioned, my name is Jon Qual with Qual Dairy out of Lisbon, North Dakota. I farm, we dairy and grain farm. It's myself, my brother, my father, uncle, and my 2 cousins. So there's six of us involved in the business. Back in 2017, we started the project of looking at what we want to do for the future of our dairy. So we went and toured some facilities and then chose to build the 60 stall Dairy Pro Q, and along with a new 320 by 360 cross vent barn. So in this picture here, you can see how we went and attached our cross vent barn that holds about 1,200 animals onto our 2 natural vent barns off to the side. And the main parlor, but Marcia was just pointing out there, is the gray building in the front part of the picture is where our parlor and holding area are at. So we looked at ways to be able to just tie in our old facility and still utilize those barns, along with expanding to have more space for cows in the future. And then our old parlor is kind of on the other side of the middle of the picture, somewhere hiding on the other side of those natural vent barns, along with our calving barns and our feeding areas in that picture, and some of our other small calf barns as well. So if we want to go to the next slide. So here's a picture of our 60 stall Dairy Pro Q that we've installed. We've got on the front, we've got our entrance where they walk in, and then we walled that up to kind of seal it up so they don't stop to look too much. So they come from the holding area and load on, and then make an 8-minute turn going around in the parlor, and then exit off the other side. And if we have a cow that is still milking, as we do individual quarter milking, if there's a cow milking at the exit, the whole rotary will do a soft stop and wait for that cow to milk out on the last quarter. So what we used to be in was a double 12 herringbone was where we were at before in our other facility, and it had been expanded over the years, and we'd milked in there for over 30 years. So it had reached the point where we were looking at options. So that's where we came up with this. So then what we have in that parlor is we've got one person in the parlor who's doing the monitoring and then assisting any cows that need a manual attach if the udder isn't perfect or if they're dancing around with the robots. And then we have that one person that's out in the barn bringing our groups up to the parlor. So as you can see in the picture here, it's just where they're all attaching and then going through the process of cleaning the udder and doing the proper amount of stimulation time, which is something that we can also adjust to whatever we prefer to do. And then it strips the udder, and then once we see that good clean white milk going through, it'll rotate over and put the milk into the good milk line and out into the milk tankers.
And just so not to interrupt, John, but also the same cup is the one that pulls dips, so he does everything.
Yes. Oh, yep. Sorry, I forgot to finish the process. Yep. So then after the quarter is done on the animal, then it'll do the post dip, and then it removes it. So it's doing a pre-dip on the front side, post dip on the back side, and then it's doing that post dip just individual quarters as they're coming off. And then the machine swings back in, does a cleaning rinse, also shoots water at the camera, of course, to give that a quick clean, and an air blow to keep the camera clean for attaching to the next cow that comes onto that stall. And the next slide, I believe we've got the Q view. Yep. So in the Q view here, on the right side of that screen is the monitor that the person in the parlor is looking at. So off of that, they can look at what the cow's number is, how close she is to her expected average for that shift at that time of the day. You can also see if which quarters are done or if a quarter hasn't attached. And then it goes through different colors as the machine is being attached. So you're starting with the blue when it's just attached and doing the dipping. And when it's going to do the milk letdown, it switches to a light green color. And then as they get closer to their average for the shift, then it goes to a dark green color. And after it's completed and done, that's when the number will just be gray on the bottom. And then we have it programmed. So if we have manual cows in our herd, and when we were expanding back when we started, we weren't super picky on some of the animals we purchased because we knew we had the option to manual attach. So our robots, if it doesn't attach for how many ever times we choose before, we can make it automatically roll them to be a manual cow. And then when that cow would come on the rotary, it will show up as orange, and the light is also different out. So the milker can either see it on the screen or also see it right as soon as they walk on. They know that on that cow, they have to hit the button, the arm swings out to the general vicinity of the udder, and then the cups drop and they just attach the cups. And then if they need to, they can adjust the arm up and down, but otherwise they're still not having to get in there and do a ton of extra stuff, but they do have to then assist and put the 4 cups on. And then my brother Mark uses the computer in the deep our room right beside her. We've got our little DPQ office room that he looks up all his data off of there, whether it be for their Cow Scout collars, for rumination times and activity, and then also the big one for milking, conductivity. We can monitor robots. We check those daily too to make sure the robots are performing as they should be, and all the other herd work that he also uses, that we have PC Dart integrated to work with the dairy plan and the rest of it to keep everything going. So if we go to the next slide, that's one just out in our new barn that shows Mark working at the computer, and then on our cows, it has the Cow Scout collars. So every cow has one of those to track their rumination, their eating, their activity, and then it also is obviously has their number to correspond to their stall when they come into the parlor. So that's what we're using for our identification in the parlor as well. So that provides us a lot of different data to look at on each individual animal to make sure we're doing as good as we can to take care of each animal in our facility. And the next slide here shows on our exit side, we've got the sort gate. So we have a double sort gate. So the front sort gate gets used for breeding in our exit on days where we do some time breeding. So we'll utilize it for that. We'll utilize it for, if you would have a cow, you need to sort back to go through the rotary. If you'd have a problem with the machine, the operator who's in the parlor can just hit a button and it'll auto sort to that front pen also, or if they have any other reason to sort one out. And then we also have the rear area for doing our double sort, which also gets utilized a lot for the hoof trimmings, for lot changes, for moving cows from pen to pen and such. And then off the far back corner of the screen, you can kind of see we've got a head chute down there for checking animals. And then we've got a concrete foot bath that's set up. That's an automatic foot bath that we use through specialty sales. That just is a kind of a set it and forget it thing for the foot bath side, which is a big deal to make sure you have good feet with a robotic parlor, just so that everybody's sound when they're coming in, when the robot's underneath the animal. And the next slide, we have the feed pusher out in our barn. So we have a Gia FR1, and out in the barn that starts pushing feed at 12:30 once we've been done driving through those barns to dump out the morning feed. And then it pushes 6 times a day is what it does. So it's done at like 6:45 a.m. the next day. So it's doing 4 pens of pushing on the first pass. Then it stops back at the docking station for 10 minutes, and then it shoots out and does the last 2 pens in pens 5 and 6. So it does a lot of pushing of feed on a daily basis as well. And our next slide shows our automatic alley scrapers. We've got the Gia set up there with the max access panels that we use. So those panels are really nice for keeping track of the motors and everything, to make sure if that thing would have an obstruction or have a trouble with a cable, it has the ability to sense that, and it'll attempt to move a couple more times. And then if it still senses something, then it stops. So that's a big deal to have that for longevity of those cables. We've replaced 2 cables now since we started December of 2017 would have been the first cows in the barn, and the parlor started in April at 18. So the cables and everything have lasted quite well. And then we do grease those on a weekly basis. The rollers, we'll have somebody run through and do rollers and oil chains. And then on the sides, we have the DCC water beds that we use the solid separator and put a little bit of solids on top to give a little extra on top of them. So we've been happy with that for doing the bedding side of things. And that was where I was a little hesitant right away on solids, just because I didn't know anything about them when we initially started. We weren't familiar with them, but that's been a good way to not have to grind straw to put on top of beds. So we've been very happy with that as well. And that's kept even with green bedding that we're putting on, we're making it in the morning and using it the same day. It's still, our somatic cell runs right in 200,000 just with green bedding. So we're not composting it or doing anything with it other than doing green bedding day to day. And then the big thing too with the solids, don't have as much wear and tear on our equipment and in the parlor on equipment as well, by just having the separated solids. And with that, we're about the 10-minute mark and Q&A.
Thank you. Great overview of the operation, and a lot of detail was provided, but I'm sure people have more questions. Jim is joining us, and they kind of start coming. We have one question here in the queue. Sure. And maybe Jim can start with this one, and then I'll take the next questions as they come, or the following one, I guess.
Yeah, so the question right now is for you, Jon, is do the cows need some time for adaptation to the rotary robot, or were they producing pretty well since the first day? So just kind of your adaptation and maybe some details of how that went.
Sure. Yep. For us, the biggest thing on the startup week was actually, since our cows were coming from a herringbone, they weren't used to stepping onto a rotary. So and then initially too, I didn't know if the robots had to be manually attached initially for a few shifts. Until we got into the nitty gritty of what we had to do there. And actually, the biggest thing was just getting the animal to step on. The animals were really good at coming off, and then you just hit the button as soon as you brought the animal on for it to swing out and auto attach. So that first startup shift, the units were doing the auto attach, and the cows really just had to get used to hearing a little bit of extra different noises. And other than that, it was a way smoother than we were hoping for the startup. And then I was really worried about them having to get off the back, thinking that for them to back off, they wouldn't know what to do. But that part of it seemed pretty simple compared to what I was thinking it might be. So the big challenge is just getting them to make that step onto a rotary when you're coming from a herringbone.
Sure. And how did GIA support you during this process, especially as you're getting started and stuff like that?
Yep. Yeah. So when we were one of the first ones in the US, so they were still working on training in a North American team and getting them involved. So we had some people from North America that were here, and then a lot of people from North America for all the equipment. And then we had a good group from Germany and Poland and areas over there in Europe that are part of their worldwide team that were here for that first week plus to make sure everything was dialed in. And then the North American team obviously was here for longer to make sure everything was working properly. And they're still involved today. When we have something come up, or if they have an update or anything, they're here to help out with that as well.
Okay. So in your estimation, how long did it take to get, how can I say, a routine and the cows that are somewhat adapted to it? I know transition from herringbone to parallel to the rotary was additional challenge for your cows, but how long do you think it took?
Yeah, so for the cows to adapt was within the first couple of weeks. They were adapted to doing their thing, and within the first 3 to 5 days, that they're pretty good. And you just have a couple that are still hesitant about getting on the rotary, maybe, but as far as getting the herd used to the system was definitely just a couple of weeks, and we're up and going there.
Mm-hmm. And what % of your cows do you think are still manual attached today?
We're probably in that, because we don't monitor it a lot, so we just let them keep auto rolling over. So like right now we're at probably 10% of the herd is in that manual attach range, which since it isn't a labor intensive thing to the point of where all they have to do is put those 4 cups on, we're fine with doing that and not having to call anybody out of the herd.
Okay. Jim, you want to ask the next question from the audience?
Sure. Do you have any issues, and I know this happens in rotaries, whether they're robotic or not, any issues with downer cows, or any challenges with cows, both adjusting to the robot or even now, or having challenges getting on or off? Or
Yep. Yeah. So the big thing is keeping their feet and legs sound. If you have somebody with like for instance with ours, where the robots swing out off the right side of the animal, it's a big deal to have their back feet be sound. So if they've got a sore back foot, that's where you can have issues with the animal. So that's where the big thing is, making sure to have sound feet under the animals for getting on and off really any parlor. But that's the one thing that we'd realized right away. And we were fortunate to kind of reinvent the wheel on our end for our foot baths when we built this parlor, because we knew that was a thing that was one of our weaknesses in the winter months, especially. So with this system, we're able to run the foot baths year round. So it's helped out on that.
So just to complete a discussion on those manual cows, I have one more question here from the audience that says, what is the reason for those manual cows?
Yep.
I don't know, it's not very clear to the audience yet.
Oh, sure. Yep. So if you get, our days in milk isn't the greatest. So that's where we've got some cows that are on the bubble where they could be dried up, but it seems like you get some of those cows, you get them to where they dry up, and then they just end up getting fat on you too. So if you have cows that have really light udders that are like, let's say they're like a 35-pound cow, those cows, once their
Mhm.
teats shrink in and their udder, and we're milking 3 times a day. So
Mhm.
that's the thing. They don't have a lot of milk in their udders. Those are the ones that you see a lot of the attachment things on towards the end of their shift. So that, or end of their lactation. So when they come back in for their next lactation, it will go back to trying to do the auto attach again.
Mm.
So then when you get into that next lactation, it will reevaluate the way we've got a program reevaluate that if she's back to being auto or not. And
Mm.
if you have a and you have the ability, if you have a cow with like all the systems out there, if you've got a light quartered cow or a cow that has no milk on a quarter, that's where you just code that out and it can still auto attach the other 3. But if you would not code that one out or something too, that's where it's still trying to find that other teat. So then it could roll over as well that way. So.
Interesting. So that helps your efficiency in the sense that you're not spending too much time trying to attach, right? So you guys take care of it quicker. Okay.
Right. Yep.
Makes sense. Okay, excellent. Jim, could you ask the next question, please?
Sure. This is always $1 million question with any robot system. It's about maintenance. So one of the questions is hours of maintenance and then kind of cost of maintenance. Is it more expensive than a traditional rotary, or what do you think about maintenance costs or comments?
Yeah. The maintenance cost is always the challenge from farm to farm too. So the big thing would be, obviously there's more maintenance than a regular rotary because we got 60 robots on it. So that's the first challenge. So typically I would say that my brother or myself, we're utilizing at least an hour a day to check modules if you've got a module issue or something, or to check other little stuff on the robot side, to keep the 60 of them rolling. And then we also have 11 extra modules on our farm, especially, and now I think they recommend you could get a few less, but when we were on the early end of it, is when it was helpful to have the extra modules. So we're able to swap a module out in 10 minutes, let's say 15 minutes. If you need to take the module out for an issue, you just swap that and then you can deal with that later. And then obviously you can just throw a barrel in it if you don't have time to deal with the robot at all and mess with it later.
Interesting. So a big question again. What were the reasons for you guys to choose robotic rotary over a box system?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for us, it was we were looking at what we wanted for not having to reinvent the wheel on how we did all our other herd stuff was one of the big things. And then we also liked the flexibility of if a robot goes down at night, the night shift just puts a barrel in and we can check it the next day. Or if something has a hiccup on the weekend, it's the same deal. We can end up not worrying about it if we're busy, because we run a half crews of people on the weekend, so we run less people every weekend, and that gives us some flexibility for what we're doing there as well. And then obviously we have 60 stalls, and for the amount of cows we're milking, you could build a smaller rotary and still get all the cows through it at 3 times a day. But we were looking at for the future of our farm, what we did or didn't want to do in the next 15 to 20 years too.
Okay, thank you. Jim?
What kind of milk flow, and I'm not sure I understand, border to catch the clusters off? What's your milk flow? Do you understand that comment, Marcia, and the border to catch the clusters off?
You mean as if they come off the cows, maybe?
Yeah, that's
The
what I'm wondering,
border or something
how
that-
it works.
So
maybe.
ours with the 4 quarters that you've got, right? So you got your 4 inflations, and when they come off, if they're coming off individually, so the one, it locks back up in the upright position with these green blocks that are on there that hold it where it belongs. So the vacuum and everything stops to that quarter. It does the dip, and then it holds it upright while the others are still milking. So as it's done, it keeps holding them all up. So once all 4 are back in their home position on the arm, then it swings back off to the side under the cow and goes back into the wash position.
Oh, okay, makes sense. Yeah. And kind of as you're talking, I'm imagining in my head.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
Makes
Right.
sense. Okay, question on, did you notice a change in somatic cell count and teat ends when you're going to the inliner prep and, prep and post-up and everything's done with that same thing?
Yep. Yeah. So when we switched over right away, we kept with our dry straw bedding on top of the mattresses initially on the wall beds, just because we were trying to take out any extra variables besides the robots, and we didn't see any change in our somatic because we were running fairly low before, but so we didn't see anything majorly change. We did drop probably 30 or 40,000, but we were running pretty good before we came over on our somatic. And then that's where, so once we knew that we didn't have any huge red flags there, then we started the separator up, and then we still didn't see any somatic cell change with that. So that was where we're happy to see that everything transitioned good on the between switching beddings. So that was where we just wanted to make sure we had tried to take as many variables out when we were trying to see what the cows would do on the rotary.
Jim?
Yeah, what's your, you want to describe basically the attach time? So how much time maybe you want to comment a little bit on the attachment and then the prep procedure. How long does it take to prep? Those, how long does it take to milk? Things like that.
Yeah, that's what I should have printed all my reports for all the good Q&A questions. And I'm at the wrong spot. So we're like at that 30 seconds, everything's attached going. You got your prep going. They're milking from when they get on the rotary. They're less than they're an eighth of the way around. So basically within a minute, they're dropping milk into the bulk tank, or excuse me, into our semi tankers. So they're milking within a minute of when they step on would be a good ballpark, I guess I would say, between when that's attached to prepped and on. So everything's a fairly quick process. That's what, when we were visualizing that it would take like a quarter of the way around or more for everything to attach to the cows and everything going. And we were surprised to see that a lot of those cows are done by that 4.5 minutes. The milkers back off and they're going around the backside. The reason we don't speed it up a lot though is because we do still do the individual quarter milking, and we don't have much restriction on when it comes off to try milk the cows out to the proper amount on each quarter. So that's where we have the little bit slower turn time, the way it's set right now, just for udder health. And that's where the teat ends and stuff have been good too. That was something we did notice coming over here. There's way less over milking versus what we had in our other parlors. So our teat ends definitely are better in this parlor.
So I don't know if this is a follow-up, Jim. It says, sorry, for example, 700 mils per minute. I think they're trying to also know how many, you probably would not know this because, the milking speed they don't have in front of you, right, John? It's a kind of another one of those metrics. Do you know how many mils per minute?
Flow rate.
Yeah, the flow rate. Do you know that?
I don't in mils. No, that's something I can definitely get that for you if you have the person for the question.
Do you know pounds?
Yeah, some other metric.
500 mils is a pound.
Right. Yeah. So nope, not off the top of my head. We'd be, I don't know my exact number.
Sure, no problem.
But that's pretty good. So 8 minutes to turn around.
Take a note of that.
That 8 minutes is finding teats, attaching, prepping, milking, post dipping.
Yeah, correct? within that 4.5 to 5 minutes, all that's done. It's just you've got a few cows going around on the quarter milking, and also if you have a manual attached cow that didn't get put on right away, if the person's checking the cows in the holding area or around assisting a different animal, then that cow might not be manually attached until a quarter of the way around. So then that's where you've lost like a minute and a half of that turn. So that's where that cow will end up being finished milking more towards the other corner of the rotary too. Yeah, so that's where the 8 minutes gives the person who's also milking with the manual attached one some leeway.
There's kind of a follow-up question. Go ahead.
Need to kind of end now for the recording, John. I have a few more questions left, so if you're willing to stay, a few more minutes
Sure.
after we
Yep.
stop. So I just want to officially end our 30 minutes here, thanking you for attending this episode of 30 Minutes Robotic Milking Edition. Special thanks to you, Jon Qual, and also to Gia Farm Technologies for the farm picks that we used today. And I'll see you for episode 9 on September 16. So thank you very much. See you then. And